Welcome to the 700 Club. $2 trillion in new spending and $2 trillion in new taxes. The president is set to unveil one of the most expensive spending bills in American history while laying out his vision for the nation's infrastructure. So what's in the president's proposal? And why will it be a hard sell, not just for Republicans, but for Democrats as well? Our White House correspondent Eric Phillips has more.
The president is hoping to keep the momentum going from his first big legislative win to achieve some of his other major objectives. But the price tag may be too high even for some in his own party.
Since we passed the American Rescue Plan, we're starting to see new signs of hope in our economy.
During his first presidential presser last week, Biden continued his victory lap, highlighting how the new $1.9 trillion law is having an immediate impact on the economy.
Since it was passed, a majority of economic forecasters have significantly increased their projections on the economic growth that's going to take place this year. They're now projecting it will exceed 6%, a 6% growth in GDP.
Now the president is gearing up to unveil his next big initiative that he says will also bolster the country's financial outlook, a multi-trillion-dollar plan for America's infrastructure. The proposal includes $621 billion to modernize transportation infrastructure, $400 billion to help care for the aging and those with disabilities, $300 billion to boost the manufacturing industry, $213 billion on housing, and $100 billion to expand broadband access.
He thinks it's responsible. It's the responsible thing to do to propose a way to pay for that over time. So, and he also believes that there's more that can be done to make the corporate tax code fair.
You cannot tax and spend your way to prosperity.
Economist Stephen Moore served as one of former President Trump's economic advisors. He says all of this spending is a bad idea, especially when it will likely be paid for in part by tax increases on businesses as well as wealthy families and investors.
They're taxing you coming and going now under this bill, and it's going to have also very negative effects. This is going to be one of the most expensive spending bills in American history, on top of the most expensive bill in American history that we just passed less than a month ago.
The Biden administration insisting the need is too great to delay.
Now is the time to create millions of good jobs for American workers. Now is the time to clear the backlog and repair our highways, roads, bridges, maritime ports, airports, and more.
We are now ranked, 85th in the world in infrastructure?
Still, the plan's hefty price tag may prove to be a hard sell, and not just for Republicans who have said they won't support it.
This is just, I want to stress, the beginning of a process, the beginning of a negotiation. And there are a lot of Democrats, we know Manchin and Sinema in the Senate, but House Democrats as well are saying, actually not so fast. There may not be consensus to raise that much money.
As far as taxes go, two big items are raising the corporate rate from 21 to 28% and raising capital gains taxes. And there's more spending on the way. Later this month, the White House will present a plan on what it's calling human infrastructure with programs like health care and child care. Pat.
Well, Eric, not only are Republicans opposing this, but Democrats are divided. What do you think the chances are of this monstrous bill is going to pass?
Well, the president has an uphill battle when you think about it because of the fact that he's being challenged on all sides. We're talking about the left, middle, and right. More progressive Democrats are saying, hey, this bill's not big enough. More money needs to be spent in terms of infrastructure. You need to go even farther. But then when you talk about moderate Democrats, they are willing to consider supporting this bill, but only if the state and local tax deduction is reinstated. And so far, that has not happened. Then you turn to the Republicans who are already shaking their heads saying, this is too much money. We're talking about raising taxes too high. In fact, just this morning, word that a group of top Republicans have formed a coalition to fight back against the impending tax hikes. So there are some massive fault lines that the president has to deal with in order to keep this bill from perhaps slipping through one of those major gaps. Pat.
Hey, Eric, a little aside, you had a chance to ask the press secretary Why they call it the Biden-Harris administration? What did she tell you about that?
Well, I mean, Pat, it was just pretty curious that last week we saw somewhat of a rebranding on websites and other official documentation saying the Biden-Harris administration. So I asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki about that. Take a listen. Is there anything to be read into sort of the rebranding of the Biden administration to the Biden and Harris administration?
I would take from it that Vice President Harris is an important partner. She's the first in the room, the last in the room on most occasions if she's in town and not traveling around the country. It's a reflection of the important role that she will play moving forward.
A pretty reasonable explanation, right? I mean, considering she is vice president, but a lot of people are wondering if she's playing a larger role behind the scenes than the White House is overtly saying. So it's something that folks are definitely keeping a close eye on, including us, Pat.
Thanks, Eric. Well, you know, it's amazing. She's got this thing that they ask a neurologist with all this laughter when they talked about, well, how about education? Ha, 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 ha. Well, it's to keep from saying something while her mind is being engaged, but it looks, she's laughing at people not getting educated. She's laughing at people coming across the border. I mean, it's not a very, presidential look. Well, before this huge proposal, the U.S. budget is already $5.8 trillion, and we aren't even paying for that. The deficit in the federal budget is expected to hit $3.4 trillion. That's $3.4 trillion this year. And in February, the CBO projected that the nation's debt will swell to $35 billion. Now, you know, my secretary was looking for some things for the 60th anniversary of our broadcasting, and she came across a political editorial in the Washington Star, March 9th, 1963. And I thought this would be kind of funny because my father was then a member of the Appropriations Committee of the United States Senate. And let's take a look at that. It's kind of cute. That
would be your father with the axe.
Yeah, he's with the, there it is. There's, well, who's stealing our thunder? It was Senator Robertson trying to cut a $98.8 billion budget to whack it out. And there's Eric Dirksen and Charlie Halleck looking at it as who's stealing our thunder. And he was trying to whack a budget of $98.8 billion. My father would literally go out of his mind if he saw the wasteful spending that's going on right now.
Yeah, it's the numbers today just exceed anything you can.
Well, I mean, there's no way, Terry, they're ever going to pay it back. I mean, when you're talking about going in the tank, $35 trillion, that is such a staggering amount. There is no way that we'll ever pay it off.
I don't think they even think about that, do you?
Well, they don't think about anything except winning the next election.
Yeah.
And it's taxing. Well, that was the Roosevelt the mantra, tax and spend and tax and spend and tax and spend. Well, the spending is going completely out of control. And, you know, we do need help on our infrastructure. There's no question about it. Our roads have potholes. The bridges are falling down and so forth. So if it was actually money spent for infrastructure, it would be a payback very quickly. But this isn't for infrastructure. It's for free tuition. It's for internet access. It's for all these other pork barrel things that the Democrats want. But if, you know, Obama had an infrastructure bill, and I don't think they spent anything. He talked about shovel-ready projects, but to my knowledge, none of them really got built. He just wasted the money on their constituents. Now, we do need some bridges fixed up. We really do. They're falling down, some of them. And so there's no question, if we spent, say it's $1 trillion, if we spent that much on really, honest to goodness, fixing up our roads and our bridges and all these things, it would be a good thing. Well, in other news, more than 4,000 people packed into a space designed to hold a couple hundred, and most of them are children. The horrific images of this travesty at the border are finally being released. John Jessup has more on that.
Thanks, Pat. The Biden administration, for the first time, is allowing news cameras inside one of the overcrowded facilities holding thousands of migrants at the border. This is the center in Donna, Texas. Packed into a space meant to hold only 250 during the pandemic. More than 3,000 are minors. The children stuffed into 8 pods, as many as 600 in each. Texas Senator Ted Cruz visited the Donna facility just days ago. He told Fox's Sean Hannity the conditions are unhealthy and possibly criminal.
In terms of a facility like this, if you had a school, if you had a child care, if you had any facility that takes care of kids, that was even a fraction of what the Biden administration has set up, you'd be shut down. The public health authorities would go after you. You would be fined. You might even be prosecuted. Just that morning, a dozen boys had tested positive for COVID, and they keep putting them in these cramped locations.
Officials also are raising questions about the cost of taking care of the kids once they're released from the facilities. A vicious attack near New York City's Times Square is sparking outrage. A man stomped, kicked, and yelled anti-Asian hate slurs at a 65-year-old Filipino woman on her way to church. Surveillance footage shows a security guard watching but failing to defend or give her first aid. The woman was hospitalized with serious conditions. 38-year-old Brandon Elliott is charged with felony assault as a hate crime. Authorities say he was already on lifetime parole for fatally stabbing his mother in 2002. Now, this attack is on the same day Attorney General Merrick Garland asked for a review on how the Justice Department can better fight rising hate crimes against Asians. Well, on the coronavirus front, eligibility for vaccines is expanding. Soon, more than a dozen states are set to make the shots available to those over 16 years old. And some good news for young people. Pfizer-BioNTech says its vaccine is 100% effective for adolescents. Meanwhile, the growing number of vaccinations is sparking a debate over so-called vaccine passports. That's the idea that businesses and local governments could require people to show evidence of getting the shot before they could participate in events or enter certain buildings. The Biden administration says it will leave the issue up to the states, but will provide guidance on the issue. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis